Hey everybody, it's Friday! It's Friday, August the 2nd, 2024. This is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, my friend and colleague, who is here in the studio with me, Pastor Emily Larson, who I'm looking at in the eyes, not at the cold digital screen, talk about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. This week, I and my son Thomas, who you will be hearing from later in this episode, went on a field trip to St. Lydia's in New York City, especially specifically in Brooklyn. So this is something I have had the browser tab of St. Lydia's website open in my browser for over a year. I've been wanting to go to this church. So it is a pitch that is going to sound familiar to a lot of the kind of, hey, I went on the internet and found a thing. But this time I heard about a thing and got to go and experience a thing. And what this thing is a dinner church. And so it is as labeled on the tin. You show up, you have in the very basic, you have a worship service, you eat dinner that has been prepared by a member of the congregation, then you all clean up together collectively. You all just I put on an apron and I'm drying dishes, right? I'm just in the thick of it. And then you do a closing song and then you go home. Now that is, and so it is like a group of, like they say on their website, like 10 to 25 people. And that definitely, I think there are like a little under 20 folks there this past Sunday that Thomas and I went, and that's including us. And it is the church. It's not church in snare quotes. It is a very different church space. It's just one room in a storefront in Brooklyn, kind of in a still developing area of Brooklyn. And half that room is taken up by it's basically like an open plan living room, essentially. So it's like kitchen, dining, living room, it's open plan living. But what if open plan living was a church? And then they have a back garden, which is also like a kitchen garden. Like I watched them cut herbs from the kitchen garden and into the food it went.
So cool.
And so the kitchen garden is on the back porch, and the back porch can fit a couple of long folding tables for people. And the worship is different in that it is very stripped down. It is very we are just, this person has this job today, this person has this job today, this person has this job today. We're just gonna stand in a circle. I'm not gonna hand you any papers. There's no screens. There's no laser lights. It's just call and response, liturgy. I'll teach you the song as we're going. I was handed a lyric sheet all of once. It was mostly just okay, I'm going to sing it, now you repeat. I'm going to sing it, now you repeat. I'm going to sing this liturgical part for you, then you're going to sing this liturgical part. So it's all and very ancient, pulling from Eastern Orthodox, pulling from documents like the Didache. They're it's really steeped in ancient roots, but very stripped down. And what I think resonated with me the most, very not performative. They are not putting on the church show.
Yeah.
This is we're just doing this. Yeah. And so there was this really simple, and so we had a worship moment, but that was 20 minutes. It was a couple of songs and some liturgy. And then we went to the tables, and there was communion, but just bread first. And so we did communion in how it actually happens in the Last Supper, right? There was the bread, then there was some more talking, and then there was the wine, grape juice, at the end.
Yeah.
And there was a sermon that was, I know this because I saw the text of it, for reasons we'll get to, 2.5 pages long. They're in between pastors right now, and so it was totally lay-led.
Yeah.
And then after the sermon, there was a little bit of discussion, which is kind of another one of those themes that we've been able to pick up on is not just one to many.
Yes.
Let's talk to each other. Let's engage. And then there was then we ate. This is all happening in the midst of like we ate food like really good but really easy to bulk prep, vegan and vegetarian. There were cheese on the waffles if you wanted cheesy waffles, but you could do it totally vegan. It was very like as one might imagine for a deliberately inclusive church in Brooklyn, New York. Like they're like, oh, what are your dietary needs? But then also, so why I saw the sermon is dealt with some mental health stuff and some struggle stuff. And I showed up at the service that's really meant for adults. Mm-hmm. They do a brunch church for kids called Waffle Church once a month, which is a similar concept. I didn't get to go, but like similar concept, but like a little more for children. And I show up I'm the only person who shows up with a 9-year-old. And so, because he came on this trip with me. And so I kind of throw him, not for a loop, but like I'm introducing an element that is unexpected. Not only is this, new person here, this new person has a 9-year-old in tow. And they're like, hey, just want you to look at this text. Make sure there's nothing your son's going to be uncomfortable with. And if it is, like, we can just, like, just find a way to, like, let him step out when that's happening. And but all in like this like super not weird, just like, and actually he was fine. But it was really nice to be asked.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, cool, wow, you were like thoughtful enough and intentional enough that like, oh, this might trouble a 9-year-old, right. Or this might not be something that a parent wants to deal with in talking with a 9-year-old about.
Right.
And so they gave me that option. And I got to choose as the parent. Yeah, he's going to be fine. And he was.
Yeah.
And he did great. And he even, like, in prayer time had a prayer request. And, like, he did really great with it. But so obviously this is another one of those, like, projects to rethink church. Mm-hmm. And what they've doubled down on is church in the midst of a shared meal. The shared meal is the point. To be deeply contextual and rooted in that specific part of Brooklyn. I talked to one of their leaders, Burke, who's kind of who's certainly on there. They have church words for these things, I'm sure, but like their board, their lay leadership board. Right. And he's like, look, people ask us, how do you do this? And you could copy, and this is literally what he said to me, was like, you can copy and paste all of this to your context and it won't work. Right. Because we built this for this church in this place, in this moment, in this, and I don't know, it starts with a G, like this corner of Brooklyn.
Right.
And when they moved, they'd been in a couple other places before, and when they moved to that corner of Brooklyn, they did like intentional listening sessions with their community to find like, what do we need to adapt for this moment in this place? And now there's like all this new housing that's going in. And so like one of the things that Burke's already thinking about is, okay, what do we need to do different now that our neighborhood 5-6 years in at this location is evolving?
That's incredible. That's really incredible. So one of the things that really strikes me about the way that you talk about this, you talk about the one-to-many versus the many voices around the table. And we've known forever that there's something sacred about gathering around a table together. But liturgy, like the root of the word liturgy, it's the work of the people. Right. Right. And this sounds very much like it's not the work of performers. It's not the work of the pastor. It is the work of the people that is happening there around the table. The person who's leading, the person who is the liturgist, the person who is cooking, the person who is snipping the herbs, the person who is making sure that Thomas can be included in this. Right. All of that is just the work of the people, and it's just happening.
Well, and the whole thing, we've talked a lot about like the issues that come from the utter professionalization of church. Yes. And we fed into that. Like we are very guilty and continue to be guilty for important reasons of professionalizing church. Yes. As we sit in a church that doesn't have enough volunteer hours to give, we created a new position not 2 weeks ago. Yep. Right. And so I am utterly guilty of participating in this, but I also understand that it feeds into the utter like financial unsustainability of this whole thing. Yes. And so this whole church is small. And I don't mean like small comma bad. I just mean it is intentionally kind of the size it is. The space is the space it is. Mm-hmm. They don't do a ton of evangelism. They just grow by word of mouth, by people having a meaningful experience. Mm-hmm. And so it's not this concept's not going to work for 100 people
Right.
or 1,000 people or 10,000 people or whatever on Earth First Baptist is. This is not good. This is not going to be, they're not going to book Yankee Stadium. They're not anywhere near. There are several stadiums in Brooklyn I could pull, and why I plucked the one in the Bronx, which is 150 blocks away, I don't know. Don't ask me. They're not going to book Yankee Stadium.
Right.
They are in this spot, and they run the whole thing on 2.5 staff.
Yeah.
Like a pastor, a community person, and an intern.
Right.
And right now, they're running, even without the pastor, they've got an intern. Like, they're doing fine. It's just one of those, very natural, transition-y things. But, right now, they're doing it without the pastor. And so it's largely on, the community person and everyone going, hi, we're the only hands this church has, which is, by the way, true. But it is not, let's funnel this over to the catering department. Andy cooked our food tonight. Mm-hmm. Andy, or whatever, right? Right. It is all rooted in who volunteers, who signs up, who does it. And it is all still not professionalized. Right. But also, but also the food was delicious. Everything is done well with the intention of that's honoring the community and honoring God. But it is very much again, rooted in these people making a thing happen together, that work of the people. Mm-hmm. Back to something that keeps coming up is this probably looks a lot like a first century. The worship styles can be a little different, but in terms of layout of what happened, this is probably what some of what gets described in Acts about communal meals. This is not new. Home church.
This is home church. This is people hanging out and doing church together.
This is shockingly not new. Much like we joked with Kyle Tremblay about a lot of his models for ministry. You're just they're really solid, but not new. Right. The 10,000 person venue is far new. We can wrap our heads around that's church, a 10,000 person venue. The biggest crowd size Jesus ever had was 5K. Right? That Peter converts 3,000 in a day. Holy Spirit does, but Peter's the one doing the talking, right? In Acts 2. That's notable that I can quote that because that was such a notable crowd size.
Yes.
That it's the largest crowd size other than people wanting to kill Paul in Ephesus and the feeding the 5,000. They're not
huge.
They are not playing to 10,000 seater stadiums. The concept of not to always talk about Mark Driscoll, but he is unfortunately too close to my mind too often, is they book that stadium. They do the stadium events. That's the foreign concept to the first century.
It is. So what if we, as people who are restarting churches, as people who are redesigning and rethinking what is church, what if we change our metric? Yeah. Right? What if we change the metric and say, actually, this is church, right? Jesus with 12 disciples was church.
Right.
Right? Yes, Jesus preached to 5,000, but Jesus fed 12 people.
Yeah, but at the end point of Jesus' ministry, right? There's 100 people in a room in Acts 1.
Right.
Right. At the beginning of Acts 2, the whole church is gathered together. They're all literally the opening of Acts 2 is they're all gathered together in one place, and that's 100 people.
Right. That's
from the trials and tribulations and the hosannas and the crucify hymns. I don't know. It works. Yes. It works. It works. Yes. I promise what I just said works. There's 100 people left.
Right.
From Jesus' earthly ministry amounts to 100 people. And the Holy Spirit shows up and a whole bunch of other people take on roles, and then that's where the explosion happens. Yes. But even then, we think of the church in Corinth. There is no physical evidence of that iteration of the church in Corinth.
Right.
We cannot point to the archaeological site that is the Church of Corinth. There are churches in Corinth, but they're all from centuries later. We cannot lay our hands on a first century sanctuary. We didn't have them. We didn't have buildings. We weren't big like that. We met in Philemon's house. Yes. Not in Corinth, obviously, but my buddy Philemon. I remember hitting all my hits tonight. I love Philemon, as we know. Mm-hmm. I love him. And like they're meeting in his house.
Right.
And this is way closer to that. Again, the 10,000 seater stadium, that's the new thing.
That's the crazy idea. That's the thing that's new and weird and foreign to our religion is the 10,000 seater stadium. For sure. So change the metric.
Right.
Change your idea of what success is.
And then like be okay and be okay with that.
Yes.
They are certainly okay with that.
Yes.
They are talking about sustaining. They are talking about like connecting. Everybody knows everybody. Like we've led small churches, right? And it is that vibe translated to a different context in a way that like we led a church that was more or less the size of what this church is. It was out in the middle of nowhere. It was, kind of the ranchers and the children of ranchers in Springfield, which is not even really a place anymore. Springfield, which was a place and is now really just like broader unincorporated Anderson County.
Right.
I don't even remember what the mailing address technically is. It doesn't matter. It's halfway between Palestine and Athens.
Yep.
This thing that everybody understands.
Middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere. Right, truly middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Across the street from like a Christmas tree farm and then adjacent to some of the family's ranches.
Yep.
And it was a similar size to this and had a similar depth of connection. What I'll say about this is this was a much still more diverse community, more age diverse.
Yeah.
Millennials, Xers, boomers, some racial diversity. I wonder if on other weeks there was more. There's some racial diversity present, and like there was the common thread was this is people who live in this place, and so they craft a community that's like artsy and interesting. And I use the word hipster in Brooklyn now. I think that's a loaded term at this point. It's like the like Williamsburg in Brooklyn is like that like home of hipsterdom, and so it's all a little played out. But that's how I would describe it. And that's a real positive for me. But it is this like super rooted in these people in this place and super limited.
Well, and I think that's the other thing that we talk about on this show so often is find your niche, right? Find the thing that you are good at and do that thing. Be there for the people that are there, right? Be there for the people who are there. And one of the things that you made me think of while you were talking about, some of our former churches like Springfield, if you talk to churches of that size, a lot of times, and you ask them, okay, well, what are your goals for the church? Where do you want to go? You'll hear, oh, well, we want to see the church grow. Right? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does it mean you want to see your church grow? Like if you're listening to this podcast because you want ideas, because you want your church to grow, right?
Sure, so do we.
What is that?
What is that?
What is that? Redefine that.
But I think where I think a lot of those churches that we have been connected to and get really frustrated at. It's really interesting, right? That in one column, I can get really frustrated at a church of like 15 to 20 people. And the other place, I'm celebrating a church of 15 to 20 people. Mm-hmm. I think one of the differences is the like fundamental perspective on what are new people.
Yes.
When I was there, and I don't know, I don't have a good sample size. I've been once. I don't get to go every week. I would go every week. I absolutely, just on a really like personal, spiritual level, really loved it.
Yeah.
Really connected with it. It was one of the few times I get to go to a church that felt like a church I would choose to go to.
Yes.
If like making church happen wasn't my job, and I could just like choose where I went to church.
Right.
Which is not a thing I've had in a decade.
Right.
Longer. I would go to this place. I absolutely would go to this place. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it is that there were 6 new people there. 6 of the like 20 had never been there before.
Nice.
There were 2 different couples. One who was there as friends of the lady who was preaching, and one couple who came in a little later, and then I didn't really get to connect with, but like they were new and getting like, oh, so what'd you think? And then Thomas and I. Yeah. Right, so there were of the like not a huge amount. There were 6 people, and it was all like I felt like I am the absolute outsider,
right,
in this, right. And they even have a thing on their website, like because they have some prominence, and here we are talking about them, right. And like yo, we really try to limit the number of like visitors from far away because that's not really what we're doing here.
Right.
And so, like, you know, and they're really gracious, but, like, really intentional. Like, yo, please don't flood us with, like...
With, like, 100 kids from your youth group?
100 kids. Like, please, this is not a zoo. Like,
Right.
this is a church. Like, please... Like, and so, like, you email them advance, and they want you to contribute financially so that you're supporting the work. And so, like,
Yes.
our church gave to their church. And, like, and I emailed them ahead, and they were absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
But, like... There were 6 of us new, and, like, I'm this total outsider, and it's just like, oh, that's so, like, just very, both small and connected without being insular.
Oh, that's nice.
Right, because that's the thing where the churches of 13 people that make me really angry and frustrated as a church leader is, like, you don't actually want other people here.
No.
And when we introduce other people into this equation, you get mad at me.
Yes.
Or passive-aggressive at me, right?
Yes. Or you run them out of town and make them feel
right,
unwanted when we bring them as visitors.
I will never forget. I'll name names, whatever. They left the denomination I'm a part of, and that's on them. So when I was the leader of Blue United Methodist Church, so Blue, there's only like 3 things in Blue, Texas. It's Blue, then Blue United Methodist Church, now presumably just Blue Church or Blue Methodist. I don't know. The fire department and the general store / bar / restaurant. It was literally like it was everything.
Yeah.
It was essentially a general store that also served beer and a decent chicken sandwich. And maybe the burgers were good too, but I always had a chicken sandwich one. I would eat there I would do prayer group at Blue Church, and then I would go and eat at the, doing the thing. I'm doing the thing, being in the community, where this community is super well defined.
Yes.
And so I had the idea of we did an Easter egg hunt. Let's do the Easter egg hunt at the store. Let's go into the space where the community that, like, there's not that many people in Blue, Texas,
right,
and yet the same 4 families are the backbone of this church, and no one else is wandering in. Okay, let's go where the people are. Where the people are like a quarter mile, less than a quarter mile, like just like walking distance from the church.
Yeah.
But it is technically kind of a bar. To call that place a bar is not fair. It's a bar and grill. In the way that Chili's is a bar and grill.
Right.
It's not like a little run down, but like it's a small country store. What do you want from them?
Yeah.
And so I held the Easter egg hunt there. They were so mad at me because we weren't doing it for our kids. We were doing it for their kids.
What?
Yeah. Right.
I'm speechless.
And so that church was a little bigger than St. Lydia's. But it's not just about size. And that church got along well enough in and of themselves. But they didn't have, like, small does not have to mean insular. Small and deeply connected, which St. Lydia's is, does not have to mean like a fundamental disinterest in people, new people showing up, the people beyond our walls, right? Like what St. Lydia's does so well is it embraces its intentional limitations. And limitations is even a bad one. I don't want, none of this is negative.
No.
Right. But like it is intentionally defined. Of like, it is this room and this backyard, and we're not trying to build a 10,000 seater kitchen stadium, right? We're not trying to build the set of Iron Chef.
Right.
That would not work. It would be fun. I would love to build the set of Iron Chef, but that's not what they're doing.
Right.
And I don't know what we would do with it other than cook. But anyways, I digress. They're not trying to build kitchen stadium. They have a room and a back porch.
Yeah.
Right? And that's only going to fit X number of people.
Yes.
And it kind of balances itself out. But when a new person shows up, it's welcome and love and acceptance and that really intentional of like, I brought a 9-year-old. No one spazzed. They're all like, hey, Thomas, do you want to help with this? Oh, hey, Thomas. Like, Thomas had like a new stuffed animal, a stuffed baby, Bowser Jr. that he had just bought. And he was super stoked about it. And he was showing everyone Bowser Jr. And it was like, oh my gosh, it's so, like, I brought the 9-year-old to the grown-up party, right? And they just rolled with it. And then thought so intentionally about making sure that I, as a parent, would be comfortable. Like, that's the, like, I was the ultimate outsider. I'm not coming back.
Right.
Or not, because I don't live in Brooklyn.
Right.
If I lived in Brooklyn, I would. Jesus.
Right.
If I'm in Brooklyn, I would see if I can get a cross-denominational appointment as their new pastor. Holy cow. Thomas was teasing me of like, hey, and they were like, hey, and we're searching for a new pastor. He's like, hey. And I'm like, buddy, we're not moving to Brooklyn. Like, we're not. Like, it's almost to Houston, right? Like, we're here. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, I would really think hard about, can I be your intern? Like, I'll mop the floors.
Right.
But, so they have there's very little invested in being nice to me.
Right. Other than that's the thing
that's
that we're
just
supposed
the thing
to do.
That's just the thing that they are.
Intentional, radical hospitality to make sure that everyone is included is actually what we're supposed to do. And it is the tagline of some congregations that we've been a part of. And we've had to teach that culture of, no, if we say this is who we are,
then this is actually who we're going to be.
Right. And I've been to churches where that's the tagline, but that's not actually the case.
No. Usually they also declare themselves hugging churches. I've seen an interesting intersection between not actually that welcoming and really into hugging. What's fascinating. So as the non-toucher, right? I did actually end up like, you know, I can, as long as it's on my own terms, like I actually do far more like interpersonal contact than you would think for a non-toucher. But like, it's got to be on my own terms.
Yeah.
And they're like, exchange signs of peace in the way that you feel comfortable. And so then everyone does this very intentional dance of, are we hugging? Are we shaking hands? What are we doing? And it was just like, I watched it, and they weren't just doing it with me. They were doing it with me, which was great. And then actually liberates me to feel more able to engage in these moments.
That is a beautiful phrase.
Like, it was like, how are they? It was just like, hey, exchange and peace. Like, whatever's going to work. Like, it's not like, and now we're all hugging. And like, there was a lot of hugging.
Right.
There was a lot of handshaking. And like, I did a little bit of everything. And like, but I felt often the like, and now we touch people part of the service.
Yeah.
I live in fear. I do. Like, I get actually anxious. It's just like, you know, I have been through some stuff. I was never a super touchy person. Been through some stuff. Really defined bubble. Yeah. Even with the people, like, closest to me.
Yes.
Just super defined bubble.
Yes.
And it's not that I don't love people, but I don't love touching people.
Right.
But actually, at St. Lydia's, much like at Venice Beach UMC when I was living in LA all those years ago, right? Like, because there was that intentionality of like, yo, what are you comfortable with?
Right.
So now a little desynced from time and space, we will throw to my brief interview with my son Thomas about his experiences at St. Lydia's. So Thomas, introduce yourself for the folks at home.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I am Trey's son.
Fantastic. Okay, so you came with me to St. Lydia's on Sunday.
Yep.
And you did a really good job at worship, and you even had like a prayer request during prayer time, and you did absolutely great for a service that was not really set up for kids, right? It was more set up for grown-ups. And so what did you think of being at St. Lydia's?
I thought it was really fun. The food was great. I really liked it.
So what was your favorite part about St. Lydia's?
I don't know. I think I liked it all a lot.
Sure. So the worship, like the way the church part happened was a little different than the church you're used to. So what do you think of that?
I thought it was pretty good. Pretty good.
So I said in kind of the intro, right, that this was not really a service set up for kids.
Yeah.
So I'm recording this out of sequence, and so the folks at home have heard like my thoughts about how they handled like you being there. And so how did you feel being the only kid there?
I liked it. I did. I liked it. It made me feel sort of special being the only kid there.
Sure. So, what about it made you feel special? Like, did they do something that made you feel special?
No, really, it was just me being the only kid.
Sure. So, what'd you think of, like, church being, like, part of, like, having dinner? Like, what'd you think of that?
I think it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah. So, why do you think it's a good idea?
I mean, if you go to a church where without food, you might get a little hungry, but if you're eating, you're not so hungry, so you can focus less on your hunger and more of what's happening at the church.
I think that's a great idea. So, anything else you want to say about your time at St. Lydia's?
Oh, I think I'm good.
Cool. Thank you very much. The other piece that I loved was the sermon didn't resolve.
Oh, nice.
It was a story of, it's very personal, and so I don't want to, like, share a ton because they felt really intimate about, like, the intimacy of this community. But, like, It was a story about struggle that didn't resolve with, and now I love God entirely, completely. And now I'm entirely sanctified. No one had that accent.
Fabulous.
And, like, even that was real, right? We were not performing a form of religious perfection.
Right.
Like, the lay sermon was, hi, here's some things that happened. Here's, I guess I've alluded to mental health related, like, here's some mental health things that happened. Here's the places where I, like, grow and feel this was positive in my spiritual journey. Here are the unresolved things that, like, I don't have answers to. Amen.
Amen to that. Well, and then you said that there was discussion time.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it was not just a one to many, it was many to
Right,
many.
and then there was many to many.
I feel like so many services and so many worship services are missing that response to the sermon time, right? It's the group discussion afterwards. It's the and now what?
And now what?
Right? And now what? And when we have, like, communion Sundays, communion is a response to the sermon.
Technically.
Is a response to the sermon. But on weeks that aren't communion Sunday, or there's not some sort of, remember your baptism, or some sort of participatory element to, and now what, right?
Well, and this is, I think, that for the 21st century.
Yes.
Where there were not any Gen Zs in the room, but this is, I think, best practice more generally of just this more, like, people want to share.
Yes.
And people want or have that opportunity to represent what's going on with them.
Right.
And have it feel more that even the like traditional modes of what are technically participation,
right,
which is hymn singing and call and response liturgies. That is it's all liturgy, it's all the work of the people, but like go with me on this, right? Like we'll just use the words the people use. So like these elements are supposed to be responses.
Right.
And I can't stand a service that ends with the amen of the sermon.
Right.
No, like in the fourfold pattern of Christian worship that's dating back 2,000 years, like there's supposed to be a response for a reason. And so, time and time again, we're adding back at least a closing hymn, if not a sacrament, after, right?
Yes.
And where do we put this? Where do you put communion? After the sermon.
At the end.
After the sermon. After the sermon.
Response.
Because it's a response.
Responses to the word. Right.
And so that's great. Mm-hmm. But what we are seeing in these church but not churchy spaces or churchy spaces that are connecting across, there is that more expressive form of liturgy, right? And so like I piped up of like, hi, so we're doing 1 Corinthians 13, the love is, love is, love is. And I'm like, this gets used at weddings. It's a terrible wedding passage. Paul is like sad and angry and like he's really hurt. And he's not, like he is yelling this at the Corinthians of like, darn it, love, you idiot. It's not about your own pretension. It's about love. And so that like this lyrical, it's beautiful writing. It's Paul. Right. This beautifully written ode to love is being shouted at people that he is deeply hurt and angry at and finds overly pretentious.
Yes.
And so that she then connects it to this story of of an unresolved chord. I'm like, yeah, Paul's in a moment of unresolved chord, and like,
Yes.
anyways, I can gush forever, and I might.
Yeah.
This will come up again. I would love to go again. If you are in Brooklyn and looking for something that feels truly authentic and like, godly in all the right ways and like simplified in all the right ways.
Right.
And both stripped down and beautiful. Like it's great. It is a wonderful story of of contextuality, of thinking about what matters and what doesn't, of understanding that size isn't everything.
Right.
It's great. I think about this epiphany I had in grad school a million years ago, like 10 years ago. I think I've talked about this a little bit before somewhere on the internet. But anyway, so in public health, you have to take it was basically like a semester on challenges and a semester on solutions, right? And strategies was the class, but we called it tragedies because it was so many of like the UN has these goals and these metrics and these programs, and they're not meeting them. And this big development, whatever, has these goals and these things, and it's not working because these giant solutions don't work, so often don't work on the local level. You hearing this? Right,
Yeah.
so this is a thing that development knew a long, long time ago.
Yes.
And what we talked about a lot were how do you build, it was in the like programmatic side of public health, and so like how do you build individual programs that are going to improve the health, that are custom built to improve the health outcomes of these communities.
Of this particular.
Right?
community.
Like,
Yes.
okay, you are not going to solve all the health problems of Ethiopia. You're not going to solve all the health problems of Africa. How do you, my sample project, which I then turned in 2 years late, and we're not going to unpack that at all. I got really depressed, okay? I stopped turning in papers for a while, and then it took 2 years, and I almost didn't graduate. I digress. It was about indoor air quality in Ethiopia. How do you craft a bespoke, well-researched strategy? We don't use the word solution. We use strategy or intervention
Right.
to impact this one health outcome. Because you can do that.
Yes.
And then the hope is that you do that, and someone else does 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 that. Now, when you factor in a theological frame of this, and you have a divine creator that is managing it all, you don't have to build the 10,000 person solution, or the 10,000 person intervention, or the 10,000 person worship service.
Right.
You do what you can do,
Yes.
and build something that you can manage, and
In
that
the space that you exist in for
this-
the people that you are there to serve.
right, and then we have some faith in God to put the other pieces together. And so, no,
Yes.
this doesn't scale.
Right.
Financially, none of it. It is just not. We cannot all just become branches of St. Lydia's. We can't all go to St. Lydia's, nor should we. They would
not like that.
They would not like that.
appreciate that.
Because it's not their mission.
Right.
They are so clear on what their mission is.
Yes.
And I think it behooves us, I can't solve. God, I've tried. And am still trying for reasons that I cannot get over. I can't solve the United Methodist Church's problem. I certainly
Right.
can't solve Christendom's problem.
Right.
I can't solve declining worship attendance.
Right.
I can't solve Christian nationalism. God, I wish I could.
Well, it's saying you can't solve world hunger, but the way you do that is you feed your neighbor.
Right.
Right.
Or you build a fee, or you want to take that the one step further. Okay, there are kids who go hungry over the weekend because they don't have free and reduced lunch.
Right.
You could conceive of, any of us, could conceivably feed all of the kids at one elementary school
For a weekend.
for a weekend, or even for every weekend with just all the people you know on Facebook.
Yep.
And Instagram, whatever, right?
Yep.
I've seen this happen. At Lexington UMC, but it was really just spearheaded by Stephanie. She, every kid in Lexington who needed it had food to go home with.
Yeah.
And it was Stephanie's pet project, and she could have used a little more help, but like
Well,
one Stephanie can do that.
yes. Well, and this is like, I saw a statistic one time, I don't know if it's true still, of this county that we are in, that if each church had one family that would adopt or foster,
Yeah.
that the foster care system would be empty.
Yeah.
That every foster child would be taken care of.
Yeah. I can believe that.
Yeah.
I mean,
one family in a church.
per
Church.
Per church in Harris County. Yeah.
That's it.
I can believe that.
That's it.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
And I bet if you really factored that out, if like some churches have multiple campuses and a whole lot of different services, and there's like one person per all those services, like you got to service several thousand people, and you could do a lot. Anyways, I digress.
Yes.
About the stadiums, but like it is, like this is how I came out of that depression, and like how tragedies ended up helping me is understand. It actually taught me a lot. It was not designed to teach me anything about God. It taught me a lot about God. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of that fundamental fact that I am not God.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean I can't do anything.
Right.
But what we should all do is the thing on the scale that we can do it.
Yes.
I'll end with Dr. Ellison. I'm contractually obligated. Dr. E, who I worked for, check out the book I know of his best is Fearless Dialogues. He's this amazing pastoral care professor and taught me a lot. Dr. Gregory Ellison II. Look him up. He's an awesome, awesome dude. All of the community organizing sessions that I ever went to with him ended with what he calls the 3-foot challenge. And it goes back to his grandmother, and he does a better impression of her than I do, but I've seen him do this enough that I gotta, it was this, Gregory, you can't change the whole world, but you can change the 3 feet around you. And then what he does is and I've done this with congregations too, like he hands out 3-foot rulers and challenges you. Like, look, you can't change the whole world, but you can change the 3 feet around you. St. Lydia's can't solve all of the problems of modern church. Right. But Lord, they've created a really amazing, intentional, beautiful thing that works, that feels new and vibrant and church but not churchy.
Yes.
And they're doing it in this corner of Brooklyn. And so the challenge for us all trying to restart a church is take the challenge from St. Lydia's. Take the torch that St. Lydia's is trying to hand us.
Yes.
And folks like it, and Union Coffee, and
yes.
And the dope nightclub in Nashville that we read about, and
right.
Well
and
Church, and
Game Church, and
all these things,
yes.
all these things, right? Kyle Tremblay, and all these folks that we have learned from so far in our journey. And St. Lydia's to me is just like a really high point of we found the thing that I want to go to. Because it's also what I'm doing for my own friends and family dinner in a real way. They just have a lot more liturgy to it. Yeah. I think what we're seeing is don't think on the scale of 10,000. Mm-hmm. Don't think on the scale of 1,000. Don't even think on the scale of 100. You might get there.
Right.
Think on the scale of 10.
Yep.
On the scale of 20. On the scale of a couple of small groups spread across it, right? And that you can do.
Yes.
We can do. And if we all do that, if we all view that as the 3 feet around us.
Yes. What a change it can make.
What a change it can make. Anyways, if you're in Brooklyn and listening to us, cool, hello, welcome. I love your place. Go to St. Lydia's. For the rest of us, don't. Or do, but learn from them. Right. Don't just commute to Brooklyn for a church. Unless you're in Manhattan, and then maybe. But generally speaking, most of the people listening to the show, this is not a viable option, nor is it what St. Lydia's wants from us. Right. By the way, also, their website is below. If you want to contribute to their work, you can support them financially. It is it's a small thing, and it's a scrappy thing, and so they could always use your support. And I love them. So anyways, a link to their website is in whatever show notes below. If whatever, it's you can click it. Do check them out. It's a rad place. If you have experienced something like this in your life or long for it, email us. thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. This is one of our swings at about a different church thing too, and it was made possible and continues to be made possible by a generous Innovators Grant for the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. We need your support too. Like, comment, subscribe, share, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of that makes this show go further, makes it more sustainable, makes our work do more. If you want more of what we're doing, God, there's a lot of it, and there's going to be even more. It's at Servants Now on like everything but Twitter, because we do not Twitter. No one. It's a bad place. Anyways, it's at Servants Now on TikTok, at Servants Now on Instagram, at Servants Now on Facebook, or facebook.com/ServantsNow, youtube.com/ServantsNow, and servantsnow.org on the internet. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.